All right. Today is June 23rd, 2025. I'm Freddie Carlip interviewing Phil Stewart for the Theodore Corbett Institute for Running History Research's Roadrunners Club, New York Association Oral History Project. Phil, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleased to be here.
We had some glitches, but we worked it out.
That's right. You call us tech titans here.
I know. Um, First, I'm going to ask you for some background. Tell us your birth date, your birthplace, um, what you do, and schools attended. If you
Oh,
want to start it.
okay. So anyway, I was born on February 10th, 1950, and in Washington, D.C., and started running my junior year in high school. And initially, it was to get in shape to be a tennis player. So my father was a big tennis player, and he wanted me to be a tennis player, and he sent me to fancy tennis camps, but I was never any good. So I had much better success early on in running than I had in tennis. So I think so. I went out for cross country in the fall of my junior year and um, got a varsity letter, and then the following spring, I think I broke my father's heart when I told him I was going to go out for the track team instead of the tennis team. But I was better, as I said, I was better, and so anyway, so then I ran my senior year in high school and actually set the school record in the mile with a time of 4:31, which in 4 years of college I only improved to 4:29. So I think I probably knew that my future was going to be in longer distance running. And then I went to Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and ran track and cross country there. And it was a Division III school, and it was I was um, I was an okay college runner. As I said, I only got my mile time down by 2 seconds, and but anyway, ran all the way through college. I was in college from 68 to 72, which was a terrible time to be trying to do anything traditional in colleges because the campuses were shutting down and stuff like that. So it was,
Right.
I always felt so bad for my coach, for my college coach, because he never knew whether we were going to show up for practice or take over the campus buildings or whatever. But anyway, then after I graduated, I came back to the Washington, D.C. area and continued to run, and really that's when I got first. Well, I had run a couple of DC Roadrunner Club races when I was home for holidays while I was in college, but that's when I really became a regular participant in DC Roadrunner Club events. And at that time it was sort of a small eccentric group of people, and I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 would be a big race. And that actually right about that same time is when I first met Jeff Darman, who was had become president of the DC Roadrunners Club after a guy named Rod Steele was killed in an airplane crash, and Jeff was vice president. And so I sort of followed Jeff into the administrative side of the sport. But during between about I don't know, 24 and 20, when I age 24 and age 27 is when I had my most success as a competitive runner, which was highlighted by qualifying for the 76 Olympic trials in the marathon. I ran a 2:19:58 marathon in the wind-aided 1975 Boston Marathon, where a lot of people ran personal best times that were never never exceeded. That was the first year Bill Rogers won the race in 2:09. So But then, that was, so I would say there was a 3 year period there where I guess I would describe nationally competitive. I mean, there were 65. I always tell people there were 65 people who qualified for the trial. So I guess I was in the top 65 marathon runners in the country.
Yes.
And that in the 75 Boston Marathon, I finished 22nd. And then in 76 was the real hot year. And then 77 was a very warm year, and I placed 15th. So that was my highest place, even though the time was 222, 222 flat. And about that time, um, over just through running, I had met Ed Ayers.
Yes.
And so, at some point or other, well, one other thing I'll mention actually in 1974, I, by that time I was a member of the Washington, I was then the Washington Sports Club, which became the Washington Running Club. Anyway, we won a trip there was a 36-mile race in Washington, and we won the team title, and so we got to go over and run in a 36-mile race in Scotland. And
Oh,
when I got over there, I bought a motorcycle. After the race, I bought a motorcycle and traveled around Europe. Then came back, and happened to be the day before I left was the London to Brighton race, the double marathon, 52 miles. So I entered that off not much training, and completed that in 5:58, which is now sort of staggering to think that I ran back-to-back 2:59 marathons. But
yes.
in your 20s, you can do a lot of things that you can't do in your later years. And then 5 weeks after that, actually, I placed third in the National 50-mile championship, and that was only 5 weeks after running 52 miles. And then about 4 weeks after that, I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to run the Maryland Marathon, so I ran 20 miles on Thanksgiving Day to make sure I wouldn't run it. And then my longtime training partner was a guy named Bruce Robinson, and Bruce talked me into running the Maryland Marathon. So I ran it, 4 days after running a 20-mile run, and
Oh,
chopped 3 minutes off my PR down to 2:26 at that point. So, and the reason why I mentioned the 50 mile, it was 1974 when I ran my first 50 mile. And recent years, I became aware of Nick Marshall's list that he keeps of people who have the longest spans between their first and most recent 50 miles. So I actually completed the 50-mile race last fall. So I now am one of four Americans who have run a 50-mile race, two 50-mile races over 50 years apart. So anyway, and that was kind of a bookend I think,
oh,
on my running career. But
it's
anyway,
wonderful.
but back to 1977. So I'd known Ed Ayers, and he just through running races, and he said he was going to start this running magazine called Running Times. And at the time, I actually had a job working for the DC government in sort of youth job training programs, but it wasn't a job that, I mean, it wasn't a job where I really thought my future was going to be, and it gave me time to train and like that. So when Ed said he was going to start this running magazine, of course, at that point in time, everybody's biggest dream was to, work for Runner's World, and here was
Yep.
another running magazine getting started. So I said, gee, Ed, I'd like to do that. And so initially there were three of us, Ed and myself and Rick Platt, who put the first issue of Running Times out in January of 1977. So really at that time, Running Times was really consumed all of my time. And everybody used to say what a great thing to have your vocation and combine your vocation and your avocation. But the reality is, with Running Times, all of our competitive running careers, I think for all three of us, kind of went downhill. Although Ed did win the JFK 50 mile, I think after the magazine was 2 or 3 years old. But I know I suffered an injury in 1978, so about a year after the magazine started, that really meant that I didn't run for a couple of years, and that was the end of. I mean, I was running marathons when I came back 3 years later in low 2:30s, but I was never going to approach my
Right.
my best times after that point. But anyway, then the magazine, as I said, just became all consuming, and I remember loading up. I think it was February of 1977, loading up my mother's VW with copies of the magazine and just heading south to promote the magazine and any places. And that's really where I met Jeff Galloway on that trip. I met Harold Tinsley on that trip. And I just would a guy named Damian Howell who was a
Yes.
PT in Florida, and so I would just go around and crash on people's floors and go out to races and hand out flyers for running time. So and that was I don't know 2 or 3 week trip, sort of driving around and meeting people um the I mean, I'm sure as you know the life of a small time publication is a lot of work and a lot of uncertainty about whether you're going to get enough subscribers or ad revenue to put out another issue. And we worked. I mean, we worked really hard to keep running times going. I mean, it was a labor of love, but it was intense. It was intense, but it was I think of all the things that I've done, it was there was something exciting about seeing this publication. And the only thing we really had going for us to keep us going was our timing with the running boom. So
Right.
starting in 1977, and then um, and anyway, because none of us really knew anything about the publishing side of the magazine, we were all editorial types, and so learning the publishing, there were some painful lessons along the way
Yes.
on the publishing side, particularly when we came to newsstand circulation, and that can get you in debt to your national distributor pretty quickly. And then, of course, I think maybe the highlight of the Running Times career was my taking of the famous photo of Jimmy Carter's collapse in 1979, and
Yep.
that photo became famous worldwide. Actually, Jeff acted as my agent once the word spread that I had taken the photos. And anyway, and that's another hour-long story on its own. But obviously the photos you know were became famous worldwide. And
Yes.
as the 1980 campaign came around, I got contacted by Republican PACs that wanted to use the photo because it represented the collapse of the Carter
Ah,
presidency. That was the time when the interest rates were at,
yes.
19%, and the hostages were being held. And I would not
Mm,
sell it to anybody who wasn't using it for journalistic purposes. Mad Magazine wanted to buy it, and so I really turned away, thousands of dollars that I could have made if I'd been willing to sell it to anybody. But I felt sorry for Carter, and so really the best decision, although we didn't know it at the time, was that I always retained the rights to the photo. So if we'd sold it to the wire services, which were very interested, AP and UPI, they would have had the rights. And so right now, all the way down to this day, if anybody wants to use that photo anywhere in the world, they need to come to me to buy it. And
yeah.
so anyway, and I've sold it literally in the last couple of years. I mean, here we are over 40 years later, and every now and then I'll get a call from somebody who wants to use it. And then the photo was actually supposed to appear in Forrest Gump. They bought the rights to it to put it into Forrest Gump, but then the scene got cut. Actually, they were, when he was in his running phase. And actually, if you watch the movie, you can hear in the backgrounds that Jimmy Carter collapsed in a 10K road race today. And obviously, as they put Forrest Gump in, famous scenes, they were going to have him running alongside I mean, I assume the scene they wanted was him running alongside the president and collapsing. But anyway, it got cut. So
Ah,
all I really wanted to do is see my name in the movie credits, so that's why.
sure.
But anyway, so along about the same time, the Cherry Blossom race started in 1973. I did not run it in the first year. I ran it in the second year, and ran it, one year I think I came in during my most competitive time. I was fifth in the race in 51:01. Maybe that was 1977. But then at some point in the early 80s, I think it was Jeff was the race director, and he got me involved in doing the announcing for the race, and
Mhm.
that sort of put me on the got me onto the race committee, and then Jeff was the race director as long when Nike was the sponsor, but then Jeff actually worked for Nike at the time, so when Nike stopped sponsoring the race in 1990, then Jeff bowed out, and there I was the assistant, deputy race director, and Jeff was bowing out, so I really sort of became the director by default in 1991, which is when Nortel, or then Northern Telecom, became the sponsor. And anyway, that was when I started directing it on my own. And then Nortel was sponsored to 2000. And then that's when I actually had a call from a guy named Bill Brooks, who worked in the credit union industry. And Bill said the credit unions were thinking about putting on a little 5K race. And I said, well, you don't want to do that. They're a dime a dozen, but there is this major DC
Mhm.
race, which happens to be looking for a title sponsor. And so Bill picked up on that and went back and sold it to this credit union Miracle Day, which is a sort of a credit unions do a lot of things collectively because they can't compete. Any single credit union can't compete with
Right.
Bank of America or whatever. So Credit Union Miracle Day is a collection of credit unions that banded together, and also some of their suppliers and stuff like that, to form this Credit Union Miracle Day. And so anyway, they first sponsored the race in 2001 and have been sponsoring it ever since. So I mean, I think there may be a few other sponsorships in the sport that have been around longer than that, but certainly at 25 years, that's a pretty remarkable run, and they really have become partners to us, and it's great working with the people. So anyway, so just kind of uh, gradually over the years, we worked with the authorities to get the number of participants, get us allowed us to enter more participants, and then we moved the race out of West Potomac Park, and I think about maybe 2006, 2007, we were first allowed to stage on the Washington Monument grounds, which really is actually, an iconic staging area. And, I feel fortunate that, we are, we get a permit each year to run this race on, probably one of the most visible pieces of real estate in the world. So we feel fortunate, and the race has grown in stature, and we had a lot of world records set along the
Yeah.
way and American records set along the way. And of course this year topped everything, where we had a world best set, we had two world bests, and five five American records all set in one race. So I think that one's going to be hard to top.
You're
So
not kidding,
anyway,
but maybe.
maybe.
Um, we're,
But the 2026 race will be my last as race director.
I was
So
going to ask
anyway,
you.
I think it's time to turn it over to just younger person with with some new ideas and new energy. And we have a person on our race committee that we've been grooming for a number of years to take over. So he knows the race quite well already and will step in, well versed. I mean, we'll have some overlap this year and next year, but anyway, so it'll be new leadership starting next year.
I won't ask you who it is. I'll wait to be surprised when you make the
Well,
announcement.
actually, I just found out earlier today that we now are at liberty to say who it is, and his name is Rob Wolf, and he is currently the treasurer of the board. He also became co-director of the 5K last year, and he's been on the race committee for probably a dozen years. So
Okay.
he's coming in, way up to speed
Yes.
already. So I'm completely confident that he'll do an outstanding job. And of course, Becky Lambros, who everybody knows, will be staying on. So
Good. Yeah.
but I'll probably still do something with the race on a smaller level.
I wish all of you, Becky and Rob and you, I mean, things are changing, but I know with how wonderful Cherry Blossom is, Credit Union Cherry Blossom, that it's going to continue to thrive.
Well, we sort of view ourselves as, stewards of something that's bigger than any one of us. I mean, obviously, the race is loved by many, and so, we feel like, we are entrusted with this event that we need to, continue to nurture and keep building it and making it better and more attractive to runners. So you know, that's the way we see it. There over the years it has become an institution. It's a bucket list race for a lot of people, and we want to make sure it stays that way.
That's wonderful, Phil. And I know we're in a bit of a time crunch because you have something going on at 4, and I have to watch the time as far as how long the meeting will go. So I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to get in touch with you by email so we can set up the second part of the interview and we'll have more time.
Okay, all right, yeah, just let me know. I know you said it might be a few weeks or whatever, but happy to work with you whenever it works out.
Probably within the next 2 weeks, we can do this again. I'll be in touch.
And I have to say that I mean, I think you started with Runner's Gazette about the
Yeah.
same time as we were
Yes.
starting running times, and so it's a lot of common experiences there. So
Yes, I was thinking that when you were talking about when it started and going to races and giving things out about running times. Yes, we share a lot of that history. We
yeah,
really do.
yeah, yeah. All right, well, let me know when you want to do part two.
I will do that. Thank you, Phil, very, very much.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Gonna shut the recording.